Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Kellen here with Droid Life. So we're taking a look today at a phone that we wouldn't typically review, and that's because it falls in that budget category of phones that we really need to stop ignoring because they are so important to smartphones these days. And so we're taking a look at this guy. This is the Moto Z Play, by the way. Obviously it's a part of the Moto Z family, which we've already reviewed, but this budget guy, this might be our favorite of the whole lineup. So let's dive a little bit more into that idea. This is our review of the Moto Z Play. So I think when you're talking about the Moto Z, the best place to start is probably three areas that I really find good. They've all sort of just arrived as we've led up to this review, right? And so there's three pretty simple things, actually. Number one would be just the overall package, right? So you have this phone that costs about 400 bucks, maybe a couple dollars more, but you get, you know, a 1080p 5.5-inch display. It's AMOLED, by the way. You get 3 gig RAM, a 3510 milliamp hour battery, and we'll have plenty more to say on that in just a second. You have a Snapdragon 625 processor, which no isn't the best processor on the planet, but it gets the job done. You have a 16 megapixel camera back here. It's got phase detect autofocus and laser autofocus and things like that. You do have fast charging. You do have a fingerprint reader. You have a USB Type-C port here on the bottom. You kind of have everything you would want from a modern smartphone. Again, you don't have the top of the line processor, but when you start using this phone, you realize that that's not really the big play here. For the most part, I just don't think there's anything missing here. And then when you start using it and you get that performance and things like that, you really start going, wow, this phone has really been fine-tuned and even maybe outperformed some of those $700 phones. Now, the second place I would go here is probably in the software. And I will say this about every Motorola phone until something changes. And that's just that the software experience is really unlike what anyone else is doing. You could put OnePlus up here and obviously Google with their Nexus and Pixel phones is that sort of stock experience. But the software here, you get not only the sort of clean, pure Android approach to software that Motorola has really become known for, but then you still get that full Moto suite of software. So you have Moto Actions and Moto Voice and Moto Display, which have all been improved this year. And not only that, it's just clean and it's fast and there's not a bunch of issues, there's not a bunch of fluff, there's not a bunch of stuff to get in your way. You get Google's sort of vision of Android and then Motorola saying, well, this is how we can improve it. And so they've done that by sort of jumping on with this Moto suite. Now, again, it all works. And so when I've used this phone, even compared to the other Moto Zs, which are more of the flagship type, I haven't really noticed. Things move in and out, you jump in and out of apps, even gaming. I've played a couple of games, no big deal. You just get this really smooth sort of experience that really just can't be topped by many other phones. But maybe most importantly, number three here is battery life. The battery life on this phone is absolutely insane. I've never seen anything like it. And I know that probably sounds like somewhat of an exaggeration, but it's really the truth. So 3510 milliamp hour battery in here, which is on the bigger side for modern smartphones. It does have USB Type-C again on the bottom, and it does have quick, fast charging, so you can charge it up quickly and things like that. But my Lord, this thing, it lasts for 2 days, no problem at all. And so you guys have to remember something. I live in what I like to call the black hole signal of death. That's what I call it, the black hole signal of death, especially on Verizon. And what that means is I just don't get very good coverage at my house on most carriers, and Verizon just happens to be the worst where I live. So for a Verizon phone, and this is a Verizon exclusive still at the moment, for a Verizon phone to last me 2 days is saying something. I've never had a phone last barely more than a day, and we're talking the top flagships with the biggest batteries. Now this phone, the first day I used it, fully charged it, set it up, got ready to go. I was through the first day with 4 hours of screen on time or something like that, and I had 50% of the battery life. And so I used it the next day and added another 4 hours screen on time. I was at 8.5 hours or so before the phone finally died. We're talking 2-day battery life. This is really the first phone, I think, that has been able to accomplish that. Now, in terms of just rounding out some other additional things I like, obviously you have the quick fingerprint reader, which is on the front. That's not my favorite spot, but I've gotten used to it and it actually is pretty good. You have an SD card, you have an AMOLED display that takes advantage of that Moto display stuff. You do even have a headphone jack, if you can believe that, right there on the bottom, unlike the other Moto Zs, which do lack those. So you've got everything I think you really need in terms of a mid-range phone and even a flagship phone, if you want to call it that. So we're right there in that really nice sweet spot. And I think that's really why we've continued to talk and sort of get excited about these $400 phones, this one in particular. Now, obviously, if we're talking $400 phones, there's gonna be some drawbacks, okay? So the Moto Z Play certainly has some of those. None of them I don't think are deal breakers, but the number one thing is obviously gonna be the camera, right? So you have the puck camera here. It's a 16 megapixel shooter, f2.0. It's decent. You can still launch it with the wrist gesture, and that will launch the camera fairly quickly. But like any mid-range sort of camera, you run into the same problems. When you take pictures, they sort of lack that crisp, sharp detail. Now, you also are gonna struggle in low light, and that's a big deal. I mean, when you get indoors or in any sort of situation where the lighting is not ideal, the image just starts breaking down almost immediately when you start zooming in. So it's one of those things, good lighting, you can get some good pictures. Not good lighting, not so good pictures. And that's sort of the tale with most of these mid-range phones. Again, not a deal breaker, it launches, it takes pictures, and I think at the price point, assuming you go in with the right state of mind, you'll probably be okay with it. If the camera stuff isn't really that big of an issue for you, and I totally get why it might not be, the other things I'd point out are that as of right now, this is a Verizon exclusive. So as a Verizon exclusive, you can only buy it at Verizon. Now towards the end of October, you can buy a GSM unlocked version, but it actually costs more than this, which I just don't understand. It jumps from about $408, I think, up to $450. And again, it only works on GSM carriers then. Sometimes I wonder if Motorola is really trying to sell phones or if they care more about their partnership with Verizon. But either way, that's sort of the situation. The other thing is, to me at least, is the design isn't my favorite. Now, with the Moto Z, the regular one, I did praise them quite a bit for taking a chance. And I feel like they've taken a chance here again with this Z Play, but you still have that giant puck. The phone's also sort of wide and big, and you have to kind of get used to that. This version also looks a little unfinished with the giant gold plate down at the bottom instead of that sort of subtle dotted approach we saw on the regular Z. You have 3 buttons on the side that are kind of confusing. Sure, one of them's got a little edge to it, and so you can figure that that's the power button, but adjusting the volume and that, they're just not all that easy. And then this one in particular, this white and gold version, is certainly not something I would pick. But so the design it's obviously not as polished as its more premium brother, and I get that. And then, you know, the exclusivity is just something that's got to go. So one area that you probably noticed I haven't touched on all that much yet, and you're probably wondering why, it's the Moto Mod situation. I mentioned it in sort of the design idea, but with Moto Mods, in this phone, I kind of have the same feelings I had with the regular Moto Z. Now, this phone certainly universally works with all of the Moto Mods. So the JBL speaker, the projector, the battery packs, and even the new Hasselblad camera. So you can use all of that stuff here. I think where I still come in though is any of this stuff actually worth it? So, you know, you have these packs and they just slap on, and you can peel them off and stick them back on just like you could with the regular Moto Z, and they work and they get software updates, and all of that experience is still there just like it was on the Moto Z. But these things aren't cheap. For one, the battery pack, I don't know why you would need this with this phone, since this phone is essentially the battery king champion of the world, right? Like, you have 2-day battery life. Do you really need to spend $70, $80 on a battery pack? The projector still doesn't have all that much value at the low resolution it has. The JBL speaker's decent, but at the price, you could probably buy a decent Bluetooth speaker if you really want that extra sound. And then, of course, the Hasselblad camera is just, I don't want to call it a complete disaster, but it is clearly not living up to the name of Hasselblad, and the True Zoom is just not something I would recommend anyone buy. If you need something like that, just go buy a point and shoot, and you'll be much better off. So the Moto Mods, they work here, and they work just like they do on the regular Moto Z, and I love it that they've gone with this sort of universal design, and so the whole lineup gets to take advantage, but I just don't know that there's enough there in order to get you to fork out that extra cash for it. The phone by itself is plenty good. In the end, if your budget is $400 and you're on Verizon, the Moto Z Play is a really, really easy phone to recommend. You get a clean software experience with some added functionality from Motorola that we've come to enjoy. And then you have best in the world battery life. Now, I know that sounds like a crazy exaggeration, but I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never had a phone that lasts this long. Of course, you don't have the next gen camera, and so you do kind of take a hit there. And then again, as I just mentioned, this is a Verizon only thing right now. So if you're not on Verizon, you have to wait till the end of October, pay more for an unlocked version, and that's just sort of an unfortunate situation. But either way, Verizon people, if you're listening and that's your budget, you really can't go wrong here. The Moto Z Play is certainly a phone you should check out.